Okay, so once we have made sure that we have downloaded and imported all of those different assets, so that includes the Retro 3D shader pack, the standard assets for Unity assets pack, the Dreamforest trees assets, and the Footsteps snow and grass assets. And then you should have also installed the Unity post-processing asset as well. So post-processing, if we go down to here, this is where you install the post-processing pack. Okay, so once you've done all of those things, we want to go back to your scene. Now in your third person or your first person controller, just make sure you've got a camera, and if you have, then you can delete this other camera here. So I'm just going to delete that camera. Make sure you have a terrain, all right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the terrain bigger. So to do that, we go over to settings on the inspector side over here. We click on settings, and then we go down to mesh resolution on terrain data over here. So just so you can see where that is over here. And I want to change the terrain width and the terrain length to 1500. All right, so this is how you make your world bigger. Okay, so once I've made my terrain bigger, I've got a blank canvas and I'm going to start creating the look in our game. So I have the lighting Sky 6, so you can see the sun in the background here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some hills. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. You can move your, you can use your arrow keys to move yourself on the scene. All right. And then what I'm going to do is in Inspector again, I am going to paint some hills by clicking on this paintbrush here. Okay, so there's lots of different brush sizes. What I want to do is I want to, just going to zoom it out so you can sort of see. So make sure when you move it that you've pressed your I key so that you can start moving it. All right. If you press shift, you can go faster. So ideally what I want is I want you to do some small hills here, some small hills here, and some small hills here. And to do that, I would probably use the, and I'm just going to go back to terrain, the second brush, and then I'm probably going to use the fourth brush to make bigger hills. And when I do that, I'm going to change my brush size to 87 and my opacity to 6.6. Okay, and so it's going to be square for the smaller mountains and then bigger hills sort of to the right and to the left to create some sort of symmetry. Okay, so I'm just going to pause the video while I do that. Here I've created some hills here. It's a bit symmetrical because you can see the sun in the background there. Okay, so I'm almost done. I'm just finishing up making my mountains bigger here. Trying to make it symmetrical. Spend some time on this because you need to sort of get used to how the terrain works. So what I'm doing is I'm just holding this down and going up. Yeah, so it takes a few minutes to make some good tall hills. And it takes a while to get used to how Unity works and that. So just play around with it a bit until you're happy with the hills that you get. A few tips here as well to smooth things out. You can smooth and height out here. and you left click to raise, and you hold shift and left to lower. So I'm just going to lower these ones so that we have a little bit of space in between there, and just make it a little bit nicer. Alright, but that'll do for now, and I can always go and change it later if I want. Okay, so you can try different brushes as well. They will make things a little bit different. Alright. Okay, so hopefully you can get a nice little symmetrical look. It's all quite an important part of good looking art, because if you have a look at a lot of different games, you'll see that there's quite a lot of symmetry. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to create a low poly snow environment. So to do that, we go to project, and then what we want to do is we want to create a new material. So to do that, we right click, create material. All right, I'm going to call this snow terrain. Please make sure you call it something. Don't just leave it as material. This is all part of the file naming part of like relevant implications and conventions. Okay, so make sure you are naming things as you go. Now let's go to the shader drop down in Inspector. So we are clicked on the snow terrain here, and this shader drop down here. All right. So what we want to do is we want to find our Retro 3D shader pack. Okay, so hopefully you didn't have any errors downloading that. We go in there and we're going to go flat lit. So this is going to give it that triangular look. All right, and then let's go to settings on terrain. So we click back on the terrain. We head over here to settings, and then we go down to material, which is right here. And at the moment, it just doesn't have any. It's got none physics material, okay, because material is about physics. And here we go. We're going to drag and drop. Sorry, let's go back into that. Terrain, material, and we want to drag and drop the snow terrain into there. Okay, and then you can see that it's looking kind of cool. The lighting and stuff's a bit bad, but we will get there. We'll change that. All right. Now what we will do is adjust the lighting and the post-processing and then the textures. I'm not actually going to add a texture. I think I'm going to keep it a solid color, since the low poly style works quite by itself. If we were painting the terrain in the normal way with multiple different textures, we would just use the paint texture over here, that drop down feature on the terrain. But since we're breaking the rules and using a free non-terrain shader to get that low poly effect, we can't do that. Okay, so that would be another option here. But on this snow terrain material, I'm going to leave it blank. But if you did want to add a texture, here would be where you would add it. All right, just in here, you would click on his and you would add in some sort of texture, but I'm not going to do that today. No matter what you do need to add something, all right? Like environment lighting. That's going to take our graphics to the next level. So if you read that blog post I was telling you about, and you look at the reference photo, I'll show you. This reference photo here, you'll notice it's pretty monochromatic, meaning that it's only got one color. One light source is sort of bouncing off everything to give it that uniform look, and that light source is in the sky. All right, this is actually different from global illumination, which is a whole separate thing. This is more like faking indirect or ambient light. All right. So then we just adding that skybox in and environment lighting will really help the materials and the reflective surfaces shine. So if you go back to the lighting tab here, and remember, if you don't have it here, you just go up to Windows, Rendering, Lighting, all right, and that will open that lighting tab. And what I want to do is create this indirect light that bounces off the surface, and I don't want it faked, all right? So make sure that you disable that completely. And that is under ambient mode here, baked. So we want to disable that. There we go. Disable baked there under mixed lighting. Once we've done that, we just want to hit generate lighting at the bottom here, okay? All right. So now we can already see like the oranges bouncing off all this low poly surface, which is awesome. But let's bring that intensity down a bit, all right? So we go back up to environment lighting, and we're just going to bring that down a little bit so that it's not so sharp there. Let's go to about there. 0.77, that's looking a lot better. Oh, there's one more thing that we also need to do. We need to go back to our snow terrain down here in the assets, and that's what we dragged on top of the terrain component before. Now let's take the color, because I don't really like this color. Alright, so let's go back up to Inspector. It's a bit too white for my liking. So we go into the color tab, and I think I'm going to go and change it to like maybe a more purple. I really like that. If we had a look at my inspiration folder, you'd see the kind of purples that I quite like. So you could also use that color picker tool if you wanted to, this color picker tool, but I'm just going to eyeball it. That's a bit too bright. Bring it down a little bit, maybe make it that. Let's just see how that goes. It might be a bit too purple. I'll probably change it. It's a bit dark. That looks a bit better. Alright, so now what we want to do, alright, so let's go back to directional lighting. That's the sun source, and that is quite yellow. Inspector tab, see, yeah, that color's quite yellow. So it's given me a little bit of trouble with that lighting. So what I want to do is, I want it in real time. So to change it to real time, we just click on this mode here under light, and so any changes we made will be seen in real time, and then you select the color that you want to change it to. So I want it to be blue, maybe sort of